So, tina koto, tina koto, tina koto katoa, and no mai hari mai, and welcome to the second Global Impact Virtual Conference hosted by ISTE and community leaders. Atamarie, I'm Dr. Michael Harvey, one of the ISTE and ASCD community leaders and a member of the global team. We have had an incredible lineup of speakers today, and this session's presenter is one of them. So it's with profound excitement that I introduced you to the amazing Yaritza Villalba. Okay, so an award-winning, globally recognized education consultant, Yaritza brings over 15 years of experience in urban education to our conference today. As the CEO and founder of Mackenzie's Venture LLC, she is dedicated to creating opportunities that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in both education and technology. Yaritza's journey began with teaching social sciences to high school students in Brooklyn, New York, after earning her degree at the University of Albany. Her passion for culturally responsive and project-based learning has led her to roles such as assistant principal at an expeditionary learning school and hosting the global EdTech series #Ask Yaritza Culturally Responsive Teaching with Microsoft. I got to know Yaritza when she served as an educator innovation lead at Microsoft Flip, where she led professional learning opportunities focused on culturally responsive, sustaining education and project-based learning for an international network of educators. Beyond her professional endeavors, Yaritza is also a published children's book author, weaving her commitment to diversity and empowerment into stories that inspire young readers. Her mission is clear: to provide strategies and resources that ignite critical thinking and meaningful conversations both in and outside the classroom. The session is in English. If you need to turn on captions, please do so by following the directions using the link in the chat. So, without further ado, now let's hear from the awesome Yaritza.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I know we've had a long day of learning, and hopefully with today's session, I can drop some gems and help you guys get started on not only a global hour of code, but thinking about global collaboration. So as Michael said, I'm Yaritza Villalba. I'm the CEO and founder of Mackenzie's Adventures. We are a global consulting company, but above all else that's listed here, I am Mackenzie's mom. And I feel like every single day she's challenging me. And those of you who are parents, you know this, she's challenging me to be a better person. So with that being said, today is all about not only setting the stage for what global collaboration is and introducing you all to what we have coming up in August with the Global Hour of Code in Nigeria, but also the importance of cross-cultural communication and how do we leverage technology to ensure that students and educators in underserved communities have a way to feel like they're a part of a larger community. So kind of like a community without walls, right? Or borders. And so please feel free to share any aha moments that you have across social, and be sure to use #GlobalImpact just in case I miss anything in the chat. Let's dig in. So let's set the stage. What are real and tangible actions that we can take to change the world? Those of you in the chat, please, I want to hear from you. What I'll be focusing on today are 3 of the specific SDGs, so 4, 10, and 17, and you'll see exactly why as I mentioned some of the things that I've done, but also the importance of understanding I can't do it all by myself. And so I've tapped on, friends and ed tech companies, and I've said, hey, I've had this idea for global collaboration. Can you help me? And honestly, it's been positive with the assistance, but please be mindful that SDG 17 is important. It is there for a reason, right? Partnerships are golden. So before I can talk about all of the fun aspects of global collaboration, I need to kind of like get this out, right? The idea that yes, it's fun, but it's not easy. There are geographical barriers that exist that not only are our students challenged with, but educators. And so whether we're thinking about conflict zones or areas that were impacted by war and civil unrest, we have to be mindful that in today's age, our students are being exposed to so many things, but they're also experiencing things that you and I probably have not. experienced, right? So whether if it's poverty, whether if it's not having, clean water or sanitary water, or living in sanitary conditions, but also being exposed to war. Also, our students are being impacted by natural disasters. And so when we think about these barriers, I really need you to consider how before a student can engage in a global collaborative experience, or for a teacher to even volunteer to be a part of this, we have to be mindful of access. And what does that look like in regards to equity, and ensuring that when we do create these experiences, they're experiences that were created for all. Although I'm going to save the Global Hour of Code in Nigeria for a bit later, one of the aspects that we're looking at as well, because of the remote locations in Nigeria, is being sure to have these unplugged coding activities, right? Or activities where they don't necessarily need access to Wi-Fi or computers to be able to engage and learn these computational thinking skills. And so what impact do these geographical barriers have on quality education? We know that there's limited access to resources. I visited Morocco 3 years ago, and I was brought there to actually talk about global collaboration and what that looks like. And I remember having to use my cell phone to present live to over 40 young girls, right? And thinking about how difficult it was because of the Wi-Fi connection. So being very mindful of the resources or limited resources that folks who are put in front of us have. Teacher shortages, we are seeing this every day. So I'm not referring to during, COVID. This is happening now, and we're going to see it a lot more as these executive orders are being put into place. And so what are we creating to make sure that our underserved areas, that for some of us has always been underserved, are receiving the adequate resources or access to these resources? Infrastructure challenges. I recall having a conversation with Girl Rising. I don't know if any of you have heard of this company and community. And we went live and we talked about how girls around the world do not have access to quality education. And there's so many countries that believe that we as girls should not even have an education or have exposure to technology or STEM and STEAM. And yes, it's 2025, but these are some of the challenges that our kids are going through. And because of the areas in which they live in, you have these infrastructure challenges where there's no buildings for them to attend school in. And then the disparities. And I promise it's not all negative, right? We're going to get to the fun part, but I feel like before I can engage with you all about the fun aspect of global collaboration, I have to share about the truth and the honesty of it, right? And it's that disparities in education do exist, and these geographical barriers can literally impact students, especially those who have always been disadvantaged. Hopefully you're still with me. So with all that being said, I was asked 4 years ago from an assistant principal in the Bronx, could I create a global experience where her students from the Bronx, who were students with disabilities, could have access to the world? And her one task was, my students may not ever be able to hop on a plane and explore other countries. And so with this particular experience, could you give them the opportunity to learn from other students? And I accepted that challenge. And the first thing that came to mind was using Flipgrid, which we all know we had access to. And I'll share later about, what are some other tools you can use now that we don't have Flipgrid. But the second thing that came to mind was making sure that it aligns with the ISTE standards. Whenever I create curriculum or opportunities for folks around the world to engage in, I use the ISTE student standards and the educator standards because they're international, right? Which means I don't have to say, hey, this is what we're doing in New York. I can say, this is what's happening around the world. This is how you empower learners. This is how they become digital citizens. This is how you can equip students with enough skills to become innovative and designers and explorers. And so with technology, we can leverage it to break down these geographical barriers. We can create opportunities for students to interact with other peers from other countries, whether if it's podcasting with Soundtrack for Education or creating stories with Book Creator app and using Immersive Reader to ensure that students are comfortable with sharing in their own languages. And so reasons why some of the programs that I'm about to share with you have been successful is because I've given students and teachers opportunities to interact with each other. So we've had cross-cultural communication. And the most important is this aspect of teaching folks empathy, not sympathy. Students don't want teachers and educators don't want their peers to feel sorry for what they're experiencing. We are very much aware that in these remote places or remote locations, they may not have access to technology in which we may have access to. And so it's just about putting yourself in that other person's shoes and making sure that when you prepare these experiences, you're thinking about every possible scenario. And for me, that scenario is, well, what happens if the Wi-Fi goes out like it once did when I was interacting with teachers in Venezuela? Or what happens if more than one student has to share a device? What does that look like? And so not only do I provide opportunities for students to engage virtually, but here's a handout. If your teacher needs to print this out for you all to still engage in this project-based learning task, you still have access to it. And the most important is acknowledging that teachers also need assistance. So how do we provide professional development before, during, and after these global experiences so that the teachers too feel empowered? And so, of course, I aligned it with the ISTE educator standards because I want the teachers to also take this in as learning experience and to become the facilitator, and also to take some ideas like I did today with watching all of you present and say, okay, I'm ready to design. I'm able to create an opportunity for my students to feel seen and heard. So throughout these years, I've had the pleasure of not only being able to watch student videos and submissions from different projects that I've put together, but I've been able to learn from students from different parts around the world. So whether if it was engaging in a global cultural eats session, having students podcast about this is global sustainable development goals, having students take action and let us know about their day-to-day routine and how climate is impacting. I'm fortunate and grateful enough to be able to see these videos and learn from students in different countries that I haven't even been in, right? So understanding that if we leverage something like culture, which we all have in common, right? Whether we speak English or Espanol or Moroccan Arabic, it is a part of our culture, but we can take that and literally teach someone else about what we do. Or kind of like for me, I know my language is my happy place. Whenever I'm able to not only speak or present or to communicate with someone in Spanish, it's almost like we're bonding. I always say, if I can speak to you in Spanish and you understand, we're now cousins, right? But using a topic like culture allows students to explore with technology in a way where they're most comfortable, because we're saying, hey, let us know more about you. Let us know about your heritage. Let us know about your history. And so these are some projects that I've done with the Cultural Eats, A Day in the Life, SDG Chat. And honestly, this came about because of that assistant principal that wanted to expose her students to the world. And what ended up happening is, at first I had 40 different teachers who were engaged. And then I had other teachers in my inbox saying, you have to do this again. And so that second time that we had the Global Cultural Exchange #2, I had 300 teachers representing 300 different schools across 6 continents, where their students are discussing foods and they're showing recipes and they're cooking with their family members. But then we also had higher education teachers and students engaging in SDG call to action and really explaining to others through PowerPoint why it's essential for us to not only understand the challenges that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, but create a way to solve those issues. And so let's get into coding. What does it look like to integrate real world challenges into the coding curriculum? And this is honestly tied to SDG 10, but I figured out the best way to reduce inequalities is by ensuring that we're giving everyone access to the things that they need. And I know for me in my community, especially in New York, it's project-based learning. It's learning that's designed for students to be able to look at their environment, what the challenges are, whether they're local or global, and then create their own action plan. When I was an assistant principal of an expeditionary learning school, our students focused on project-based learning, and they had to think about a challenge that their communities was facing. And then they spent the next 3 years trying to solve that by creating partnerships with CBOs or community-based organizations. Now that I run global experiences, that's exactly what I think about. What are some challenges that we're facing in our communities? And how do we equip students with the information and the research and the skills that they need in order to not only present their findings, but to do so where they're most comfortable? It might be a speech, it might be a rap, it might be a song, it might be a dance, it might be poetry. And so that takes us into coding and algorithms and problem solving. I think that when folks think of coding, they automatically assume that there has to be some form of technology being used, when in fact it's just the idea of computational thinking and problem solving. How do we teach our students to become detectives? And how do we give them the opportunity to explore with interdisciplinary tasks, right? So although I was a history teacher, I loved having my students look at technology, but also look at war, the impact of war, numbers, math. How do we align this to science if we're talking about geographical locations? And so it's really important for us to integrate real world challenges into our coding curriculums. And these are some examples of how I would do so and how we intend on doing so for our upcoming Global Hour of Code. The next SDG, the importance of partnerships. Throughout these years, as I've been exploring with these global cultural exchanges and challenges, I've had the opportunity to partner with amazing tech companies and ed tech companies from around the world who have all of you in mind. And when I say that, I'm really strategic with who I partner with, because the first question that I always ask is this accessible in other languages? And if a company says no, then I cannot use that. But honestly, folks ask, how do I get companies to partner with me? And it's honestly, it's my go-to is saying, if you allow us 4 to 6 months to use your platform, I can assure you that not only will you have data on how best practices should be for your platform, but you get to see how teachers from around the world are implementing their work on your platform. And so I've had the opportunity to team up with Minecraft for Education, League for Green Leaders when we discussed the Global Climate Action Exchange, Soundtrack for Education with students choosing their SDGs, but also social and emotional learning and being able to podcast across countries. Flip Learn Kids, we've been able to collaborate on numerous of things. And Ella, who's one of my close friends, she's from Nigeria. And what's really cool about this is we have kind of like, we're like-minded. And so we decided to bring coding to Nigeria and to make sure that we're also exposing the students in Nigeria to students from all around the world. Coding with Culture, Victor Hicks, him and I are like this, right? I don't know if you can see, we're so close, but he brings the coding aspect and I bring the culturally responsive aspect to things. And I believe that that's so powerful. And now with the new Hour of Code that we're doing, we're partnering with, groups like Book Creator and Ed Puzzle and other companies that will allow us to make sure that our experience is accessible to everyone around the world, not just us in the United States or the students in Nigeria. I was able to partner with League for Green Leaders to tackle SDG 13. This is like one of like the most fun projects that I've done because I never had the opportunity growing up to track my own CO2. And to be able to do that as an adult, but to see the cool ways that you're able to do it on this platform and to give free access to every single educator that signed up for this global collaborative experience was amazing. We had over 600 classes participate for the Global Hour of Code, for the Global Climate Action Exchange. And it was amazing to see that after this session of learning how to track their CO2, students really gave feedback on not understanding just how, they can recycle something and that impacts the earth. So something as simple as having a discussion about recycling and tracking your CO2 and how much you're actually contributing to what's happening around the world is amazing. And so how do we continue this conversation and create an inclusive and globally aware classroom? I have 4 things for you guys, right? One is with culturally responsive teaching. The idea of introducing diverse literature and case studies to your students is important. There should never be one side to a story. There should always be diverse experiences and perspectives in a classroom. Also is creating an inclusive curriculum design. So whenever I create these opportunities for educators, I think of not only every scenario, but I'm very mindful of what's happening in certain communities that have signed up to engage in this, global experience. And so being able to create a curriculum where once people are engaged in the activities, they can say, oh, I can relate to that. This seems helpful to me because it's broken down in a way that I can truly understand it and it relates to my own personal experiences. Differentiated instruction. Stormy touched on this before, right? Giving folks various types of access to the assessments, but types of assignments and assessments. So I mentioned before Soundtrap for Education. I use Soundtrap for Education for students to be able to podcast. I could have easily said, hey, create a video and upload it on Book Creator, but I wanted students to kind of like take it upon themselves to create music that goes into a backdrop and that also aligns to how they're currently feeling that week. And then to speak on the challenges that they're being exposed to, whether if it was within their own neighborhoods or what's being broadcasted across the news or on TikTok. And then promoting empathy and understanding. And so the week before my global cultural exchanges, I usually have a conversation with teachers about what empathy is and the idea that their students are about to be exposed to students from across 6 continents, which means culturally things are different. Our likes and dislikes are going to vary. And so it's important for us to learn how to ask questions as opposed to making assumptions. And we go through question stems, we go through sentence stems so that when students are placing comments on each other's videos, it doesn't come off as disrespectful. It comes off as, I further want to understand not only what you're going through and what you're facing, but what did you mean by, whatever example that they give, or why did you cook with this specific oil, or why did you add that specific music or specific dance? And so this takes us to the Global Hour of Code. I mentioned activities for coding already in this session, but I also wanted to share with you all that we have a Global Hour of Code coming up in August, and it'll be very similar to the global cultural exchanges that I've done. Myself, in partnership with Flip Learn Kids and Coding with Culture, have managed to create this incredible opportunity for students in Nigeria to engage in computational thinking and computer science skills. And when Ella and I first came up with this idea, we first thought about it just being in Nigeria. And as we began to formulate exactly how we would execute, we were just like, this has to be open to even more schools. And so as of date, we have 39 schools across 4 continents that have already shown interest by filling out the form that says, hey, I want to do this. It's a week-long event. And for those of you, don't worry. As always, we will have an asynchronous aspect to it. So we are going to use Edpuzzle to record all of our videos with explaining how the activity should be completed. So there would be an educator aspect to things, because remember, I said differentiation is important, right? And so there will be an educator aspect of things, and then there would be a student-facing aspect of things. This is also going to be a challenge for all of us, because students are going to be given the opportunity to tell their story. So as they're learning, students will be filling out different activities using Book Creator. And as I mentioned earlier, although we don't have Flip, it's really important to think about what Flip gave us access to. My global cultural exchanges were not successful because of Flip. They were successful because of the community that was a part of Microsoft Flip. And that's what I think about any time that I create an activity or an experience. I think about the community of people that I've grown to love and to call friends. And so with Book Creator, I was like, this is similar. You can upload a video. There is opportunity for students to discuss things in different languages. I tested out Book Creator when we've done a global climate action exchange, and I had students from grades 3 through 5 create their own stories on how to tackle climate action exchange. So I know firsthand that this is an effective platform and strategy. And we also have Step Up for Kids Foundation, which is located in Canada. So Step Up for Kids allows, or they're a company that gives technology to students from around the world. And they just began their collaboration with us. So they won't be able to give students in Nigeria devices, but they're able to support us in other ways. So now through this partnership, we have 4 different locations in Canada that will be participating. So not only do we have 7 locations in Nigeria, we have 4 in Canada, and there's people from around the world who have shown excitement about this idea of students learning how to problem solve. And then I wanted to give you guys the link again, because I know that I speak fast, and so this is going to slow me down. This Hour of Code event is one that I believe is going to change what education and coding looks like, not only in Nigeria, but in other countries. This idea that 3 companies have come together to collaborate on something that's going to be so impactful. Ella, I wish you can come off cam. I wish you were here with me, but I know she's smiling and she truly understands that, the impact that we're going to have on hundreds of students is going to be immense. But also, we now have the U.S. Embassy involved. And so really thinking about how long-term we can constantly do this, not only in Nigeria, but in other countries, maybe in New Zealand, Michael, where we can bring these culturally responsive coding activities to communities, especially in underserved areas. And with that being said, I know I said a lot, but thank you all so much for joining us for this last event of the day. And I'm truly amazed at what everyone shared today. And just know that, why not Argentina? Greta, you just have to give me the invite and I'll definitely be in Argentina. But I feel like we're stronger together. And so if there was anything that you've taken from me, please understand that none of this is possible. This is going to be, my 6th global cultural experience, and none of this is possible without community. So thank you.
So it was great. You mentioned being stronger together. We have a proverb, or whakatauke, here in New Zealand, hi waka eke noa, which means we're all in the boat together without any exception. So eso fue increíble. Muchas gracias, Yaritza, for sharing your vibrant energy, inspiring insights, and unwavering commitment to culturally responsive education. Your passion truly sparks positive change and empowers us all to foster meaningful connections in our classrooms and beyond. We have been incredibly grateful to have you with us today. So thank you again for making a difference and inspiring us all to do the same. And just to finish off with a bit of Ted Lasso, I think we all need to inspire ourselves to become curious and not judgmental. So Thank you again.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Awesome. Or tūmeki, as we say in New Zealand. So this year, we wanted to add practical ways for educators to implement a global impact in their classrooms. We asked people to record quick videos with tips for doing just that. So now let's learn how to get started implementing global impact from the amazing Canadian Cami Cannikins and her mahi or work around artificial intelligence in globally disadvantaged communities, which I think dovetails beautifully with what we've just seen from Yaritza.
Hi there, my name is Cami Cannikins, and I'm an educator in Alberta, Canada. In the summer of 2023, I was visiting friends and schools in Africa right when ChatGPT was new, and I was able to introduce them to ChatGPT, and we had a lot of fun investigating it. Their excitement left me wondering about how this new tool, generative AI, might be used to tackle the great digital divide that we know exists when we talk about global education. This pondering led me to my Google Innovator question. How might we help African low-income teacher countries prepare their students for a future world that involves AI, artificial intelligence? Of course, this is a very complex question. And as I dug into it, I soon realized that my friends in wealthier Western countries needed to help understand some of the ways that teaching in low and middle income countries was very different. This led to a podcast called Classrooms Beyond Borders, where I talked to teachers around the world and have them describe the daily life of education. How big is your school? How many students are in your classes? What do school buildings look like? What do your outdoor areas look like? Is there reliable electricity? Do you have technology? Do you have internet? How do students get to school? What does that look like? All those types of questions. Let's go ahead and meet some of these teachers. One of the first teachers that I've talked to is my friend Esther Masunda, and she teaches in northern Zambia. And so we can see some pictures of her school here. Now, at her school, there's 700 students, 22 teachers, and for technology, those 22 teachers and 700 students, they share about 4 or 5 computers. So you can imagine how that impacts their access to technology. Another podcast guest is coming from Kenya, and I've interviewed Moses Okoth, and he runs a special STEM school where students come on the weekends to learn about robots and drones and all sorts of things. And you can see on the screen here some of the pictures of the rural schools that his students come from. You can see that they are very basic in their construction. And on our podcast episode, he even talks about many schools in rural Kenya where school is still held underneath a tree. Another podcast coming from Africa are my friends from a larger school in Uganda, the capital city. So in this school, this is one of the places where we did training on ChatGPT. And you can see here that the school has computers. Now, this lab has about 40 to 50 computers. It's one of the largest computer labs in the city. All these computers are secondhand or third hand. And although there's a large lab here, none of these computers are connected to the internet. And if we just scroll down the page here, you can see pictures of the kitchen. And in this kitchen, you can see where they cook meals. And so instead of buying intranet, which is expensive for the school feeds about 750 students nice hot meal every single day. So they felt that that is their priority over internet. If teachers want to access internet on these computers, many don't have their own computers, they have to use a personal device and hotspot from their phone. Now, speaking of phones, one of the things that is super important in Africa is not even so much the computer devices, but that AI can be accessible on smartphones. Take a listen to what happens when the director of the school announces to the teachers in this teacher conference that they will be getting smartphones from some of the visitors. So you can see that celebrating, and this is just a clip. It goes on for about 2 minutes. So my friend Esther, she is going to be on the first episode of the podcast. And there's another episode coming up of Moses. The episode with Esther is already available for a sneak peek. I'm currently editing and recording other podcasts, but the podcast with Esther from Zambia, you can listen to her typical day. And I hope that you will listen so that you can get an idea of what this podcast will be like, so that you can learn about schools all over the globe. To find this podcast, you can search Classrooms Beyond Borders on any podcast player like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can also search it on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to hear more stories about our teacher friends across the world. Join me on Classrooms Beyond Borders, A Day in the Life, a great podcast.
Great work there, Cami, and again making dovetails back, building those connections around the world. So this is our last session, sadly, for the day. You can find recordings for all our presentations and past conferences on our website. And I'd just like to thank you again for joining us in this live session as part of the Global Impact Virtual Conference. From our whole SD and ACSC Community Leader Global team, we are also grateful for your participation today. So I'd just like to finish with something called a whakatoki, or a prayer at the end in New Zealand. That's how we end meetings. So ka whakaira te tapu, kia watia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, humie hoe take. So that just means, basically translating, restrictions have been moved aside, so pathway is clear to return to our everyday activities, enriched, unified, and blessed. So I hope to see you all next year.